Yo, what's up, everybody? Volen here, in pursuit of art. I'm sad to say this could be the last video I do. It's not because I want to quit. I think my girlfriend might stab me. If you see me getting stabbed, please tell someone. It's like 5:30 in the morning now, and I've been up for a couple hours, so she might go crazy. So what I want to talk to you guys about today is doing color studies. I think when people first take these on, they're not only taking color on, they're taking about 5 or 10 different things at one time. It's very possible that if you're doing color for the first time, you're also not very confident in painting. You don't really understand all the layers that go into a painting, and you're trying to make your study look like the reference, not just in terms of color, but also shape, texture, all that stuff. And unless you get it looking right, like what you're trying to paint, then you're not really happy with your study. But the thing is that you're probably not evaluating correctly what it is exactly that you're studying. So let me just give you a quick example. Like, let's say this thing, landscape. So if we take this thing, imagine you're doing long division now. So imagine you have like 72 divided by 14 or some other such crap. So you're not gonna try and just like force your brain to just put this out, like just force the number on there. Like, you're actually gonna go through like a series of steps. First you're gonna go like, well, how many times is this gonna fit into that? So it's like, is it gonna be 6? Is it gonna be 5? So let's say it's 5. So then we go minus this, then we go like this, then our next thing is gonna be blah blah blah. So you have like all the steps that you have to take, and you're gonna take those steps. You're not gonna try and just go from here and just end up here. You need to go through that process, that step-by-step process. And since most people aren't formally taught to draw, I think we just try and pick it up somehow. You ignore all the formal processes that would normally have to go in there. So if you were a self-taught mathematician, you might devise some way that's actually better, but at the same time, in the beginning stages, you're like, how come all you guys can do long division so well? I can't. Like, every time you get the right number. Me, it takes me like hours of just looking and staring at it and trying my best to figure out what it is, but I can never guess it. Well, the thing is, when you're doing something like this study, if you're calling it that you're doing a color study, but at the same time you don't have the shapes down, so you would just start with like a blank canvas. You would start off with something like this. So if this is your whole canvas, and then in this you're trying to paint, you're trying to get the shape correctly. So first you want to be happy that your shapes are right. So where does this, it starts over here, and on the other side it ends there. So okay, mine has to start here and end there. And like, by the time you get the shape right, you think, oh, okay, my color is completely wrong, like I'm so crap at color. So then you go and you start modifying the color. Okay, so you get the correct color now, and then you've got the color right, and then you're okay, I've completely just destroyed that shape, I suck so much at painting. And then you go and you take another and you do the back little mountain now, like, oh my god, this is so far above the horizon, this is not at all where it's supposed to go. And then you go backwards and forwards, and then you go, and once you've done with that, like, your color is all correct now everywhere, so your color is all fine now, you've done the, and then you're like, okay, but this has so much more texture, I have none of the beautiful streaks of the sand going, I suck so much at painting. So the thing is, you're taking up so many things at one time, and I think, again, most people that are doing this on their own are so attached to what outcome they're gonna get. You know, my work doesn't look like everyone else's work. Why is this so hard for me? Everyone else has it so easy. Well, the thing is that you're just not following a process. You're sort of being emotional and reactive and just doing way too many things way too hectically, and you just get lost. So color is a very difficult thing, and really you should take everything on as something that's very hard. I don't say that to discourage you, but just so you have in your mind this idea of what I'm doing is hard. It's very hard. So you shouldn't expect it to come easy. And just because people call it drawing and it's not something that's taken as a very serious thing, you should not think that it comes easy. So don't be deceived by what most people say. You wouldn't go and ask people on the street about anything and take their word for it. So what you're trying to do is actually very hard, and You should appreciate the difficulty of it, and you should take everything slowly and deliberately. You shouldn't go about it emotionally and like, oh, should I color pick? I just want to make it look pretty like everyone else. It's gonna get like 7 more likes if I do it pretty. I really want it to be pretty. Don't care about that. Pretty now for a like is gonna cost you hours and hours of something that could have actually been useful to you. So without any more rambling, let's just quickly have a look at some of the biggest thing about color. So color is tricksy, precious. Color is super deceitful. So anything you think about the world as in your color book fantasy type drawing, which is what I did for, actually the only thing I've done is coloring as a kid. So color book thing doesn't work. Like grass is green, sky is blue, I'll show you all that later, is false. And water is not blue either, and you'll see that too. So color is tricksy. Anything that you think, just iconic thinking about, okay, this is this and this is that, this is all subject to change. Light and the interaction with surfaces changes really almost all the variables. So you could start with something that's green, you could light it with a green light, turn it even greener. You could light it with a red light, turn it into black. You could light it with blue and turn it into like a turquoisey color. You could light it with orange. You could light it just whatever. Possibilities are endless. Or it could be completely dark, then you're not even going to see it at all. So color is always something that when you look at it, you have to have in mind that what you're seeing is most likely not correct. So your brain at first is going to interpret everything as literal. You're going to see something and your brain's going to say, oh, that's red. Okay, but when you look at it, it's red, but it has different shades of red, loads of different shades of red. When you have a red and it starts like this, and then you have a shadow on it, let's say, and the shadow is cooler, then the red is going to turn into something like this now. But your brain's still like, oh yeah, I know that, that's red. No, it's not, brain. You're stupid. This is no longer red now. And then you're going to have it lit with, let's say, a neutral light. And then your brain still says, oh yeah, that's still red. I know red. Yeah, but brain, how do we reproduce that? So for you to be able to actually go and reproduce this, you need to be aware of a couple factors. So first of all, take on one thing at a time. Like I said earlier, people try and tackle way too many things at the same time. So they would try and reproduce the texture, reproduce the color, reproduce the value, reproduce the composition, everything, and that's just way too much stuff to do. Pick one thing. If you're doing color, ignore all the other mistakes you might make. Don't care that the nose on the thing doesn't look like a nose and it's not even a thing that should have a nose. Just don't even care about that. Simplify. If you do one thing at a time and you don't care about the outcome, which is actually going to be the next one, then you're free to simplify. Why the freedom from outcome thing? What's that matter? Well, if you don't care what the final result will be, you won't care that it looks like crap. Because the thing is, it's not the final product that matters, it's the actual experience of you having done something. If you had an athlete and they ran a track and they did like 50 laps and they wanted to take a picture of their work to put up on Facebook, which is what we do. Like we have sketchbooks, we have what we want to share our work, so we keep working, so we inspire others to keep their work. We just want to communicate, like people, because otherwise you're just in your basement and you do stuff. So it's not showing off, it's just you just want to be a part of a community. So if an athlete ran 50 laps and he was like, oh man, my shirt doesn't have any sweat at all on it, how am I going to show everyone I ran 50 laps? No one would believe it. I really need to make it pretty. Okay, I'm going to dump some water on my shirt, which is the same as, oh, I'm just going to use the color picker and I'm just going to make it look cool. And then everyone will actually see how hard it was. Just don't care about that. It just doesn't matter. You're not trying to show other people like, yeah, I do good stuff. Because then, like, if you're deceitful about your practice, if you're trying to make it look better, but you're not that good, then if others are doing the same, you're feeling bad because you think their work is better. But if we're all trying to sort of, say that we're better than we actually are, it doesn't really help anyone. So freedom from outcome is, hey, I worked the whole day. This is the crap I have to show for it. But my brain is a completely different brain. I understand concepts that I couldn't before. I can now do much better stuff. So just relax from the fact that you have to produce great work. Just do the work. And then it will become great as time, and then you won't have to lie or be tricksy about anything. So freedom from outcome. Just don't care what the end of the day looks like. As long as you are understanding things better, don't care about that. And if you don't care about it, you can simplify. So that means don't try and reproduce the texture. It doesn't have to look identical to what you're trying to copy. You can actually now take the liberty of, oh, this landscape with the sand dunes, well, I'm going to make this thing be just blotchy, but I'm going to try and match the color. So let's have a look at these things that we unlock now. So the way you can think about it is that these are principles, and really that's under the hood. So that's like the engine. Those are the things that you have operating underneath at all times. You do one thing at a time and you do it correctly. You simplify things and you're not worried about making it look good. You are doing studies to fit your purpose. And freedom from outcome, you don't really care at the end of the day what you have to show. You just care about the quality of learning. Once we have those, and you can apply those to anything in life really, we dig into the practical stuff, and we're using this for art. So in terms of color studies, and again, you could use these really for anything. Those would absolutely serve you throughout any type of study. So in terms of color now, what's the practical things that we can do for color? Biggest relationship for color is warm and cool. Figure that one out and you pretty much will have correct color. When people think that color doesn't look right, it most often has to do with temperature. Now I got this from Psychra Yassin. I also found it in a couple of books. Richard Schmidt says it as well. It pretty much refers to color temperature is going to make something look right or not. So you can see in this study, and I'm going to talk about subject matter later. So I'd say this is way too complex, and this was later on, and I spent quite a bit of time on it. So I wouldn't recommend this as a color study unless you've done some and you're okay simplifying things and you're not too attached to how it's going to look, and you can actually, you want to take the time to do something more elaborate. Then you can pick something like a landscape. Otherwise, I'd say one object, still life, is probably best. We'll get that in a little bit. We'll get to that. So just to have a look, first we can check the values. We know the values are working, so we can see that when we just desaturate everything. In comparison, the values look okay. The values are working. Saturation, that's pretty much okay as well. So the only thing that you can see that there are some mismatches here and there is going to be color temperature. Now I'm pretty much focused on this road over here and my one on the bottom. So you can see this one is actually, mine looks greener. So mine is a lot closer to the grass than this one is. So mine pretty much breaks the relationship that your brain would anticipate from what it's seen in nature. So this one's a bit green. It's not that it can't happen, but this looks much more natural. So if we have a look at this, if we just pull up the color picker, get rid of the hue saturation layer and just have a stab at it, we can see that it's between yellow orange. So it's pretty much in the orange, whereas mine is going to be, it's probably going to be up over here somewhere because it's a lot more green. So it's going to be over here. So basically the biggest difference between the two studies, if there's any noticeable color that doesn't feel right, it's going to be related to color temperature. And I can quickly just show you, if I just grab this color that I have over here, and if I just ever so slightly only just change the temperature of it, and I just put a little bit on top, you can see immediately how noticeable that is. And if I just cool it off instead now, so if I just grab this and I'm just going to shift it a bit towards the yellows, you can see that even the yellow color feels so much cooler in context to everything else. So with color, as pretty much with everything else, relationships are key, and context is really what determines what will fit appropriately and what will not. So the biggest thing that you're looking for, and there's actually 3 things, I might be moving a bit too fast, maybe I'll make another video for you guys just about dissecting the different layers of this thing, but the 3 things that you're looking for are value, and if the value is correct, you can move into color. If you haven't done value, you should spend some time on value first. Value is first, then is saturation, and then if there's anything wrong with the color, it would most likely be color temperature relationships. Color temperature is very easy to get wrong, and this is something that I would recommend for a study. This is good subject matter. Now when I was picking stuff, I picked a lot of landscapes, a lot of atmospheric perspective, and all kinds of things going on. But you know, to be honest, I actually ended up re-recording this because It just ended up being way too muddled up and way too complex. You don't want to put too much stuff on your brain to take in at one time. Do one thing only. I read this book. It's called Zen in the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And there was a boy faced with a problem there. He wanted to write a letter to his mom, but he wasn't sure what to say, and he didn't know what to say first. So he was thinking about two things, what to say and what to say first, and he just couldn't start. Now, once his dad told him to not do that, but to make a list of all the things he wants to say, and then to think about which one he wants to say first, the problem became manageable. Same thing applies to this as well. Too many things like getting the shape correct, getting the color correct, getting the color relationships correct, getting the values correct, all of that, if you do it at one time, meaning if you just start and you don't paint the apple with like an outline or a path layer or however you might prefer to do it, if you just start and you're going to just do it directly in color, like a la prima, and you just start, you will have to struggle with the shape, you will have to chisel things out, you will have to do all that at one time. Whereas if you were to first, let's say, establish a good silhouette, like you just get the shape perfectly down, then you either lock your shape or you just continue to paint over in a more traditional sort of way, then you'll only be doing one thing at a time. And one thing at a time is manageable. Do too many things at a time and you will get lost, unless you are really good. Then, and those are most of the videos that you'll see online, people are compressing many skills at one time. So that's why when you see someone designing in color and doing something incredible, like a Feng Shui video, you're actually seeing like 50 skills compressed all into one, and you're seeing 10 years of experience going into 10 seconds. So there's a big difference between someone who's ridden a bike once and he's trying to show you and he's just all over the place, and someone who's been riding a bike their whole life. They can just go with their hands up, they don't have to do anything, they know the traffic rules, everything. There is a much greater difference between who you're seeing. They're compressing skills into one time. It's like a bullet versus throwing a pickle at someone. You get like a pickle and you just hit them in the head and they come and probably bash you and then you're done. Or you get like a bazooka. So it's the effectiveness of and the quality of what's been developed. So one thing at a time. So when you look at a simple study like this, and I did this a couple of years ago, you can already see some of the problems. So this might seem like on its own, it looks okay when it's not in with the, when you compare them together though, you can see the inaccuracies. So first of all, the values are a bit off. If I just desaturate, you can see that my apple is a bit darker. So one thing at a time. Yet again, you might colorize if you want to, or you might just play and just do a value study first, and then you can do it in color. Even then, it's not guaranteed that you will get it correctly. Just do the best you can and keep trying until you get better. There's a couple different ways to practice, and I'm rushing now because I have to go, as usual. But let's just spend a little bit of time on this. So what can we see about this one that's different to this apple? So first of all, the values on this one are a bit off. It needs to be lightened up a little bit. Second of all, look at how many different relationships are going on here. So this apple maybe was shot somewhere outside. Maybe it's a window. I think that's probably a window light over here. But you can see some blues bouncing in the shadows over here. So this apple must have been, it was most likely sitting on something reflective. So the bottom of it, you can see because of the apple's glossiness. And by the way, if you're interested in materials and how you could figure this stuff out, I just wrote a huge blog post. It's called How to Render. It's based on Scott Robertson's book. You can check it out on the blog. I'll try and link it if I don't forget. You can see over here in the shadows, first of all, there's a lot of bounce light going on. Second of all, this is cooler. So there was some blues going in there. Now look at this, and this is where the tricksy part of color plays very heavily. So look at this, and your brain will tell you, well, this is green. Obviously, stupid, this is green, right? You go and you color pick it, and this is orange, right? This is as orange as it gets. If I just take a swatch of it out here, this is pure orange, like a tan color, slightly desaturated orange. Over here though, in the context of the red of the apple, this turns into green. So those are variables that you have to balance out in your brain at all times. The ground, and so basically this creates the context. So the ground and what's on it. These create a very dynamic relationship. So that means that one color in one place will look very different in another place. If I put this same orange into something like a blue, so if I just get a blue and I'll grab the same orange, put it over here, this will look so much different. Just look at how this is orange. Like, this is normal orange for normal people, and then this is just crazy stupid brain deficit orange that your brain is just interpreting for you. So your brain is basically, it's I don't know, for whatever natural reason it's beneficial for you to know the colors of things without any deception of it. Your brain is pretty much in real time, it's showing you that this thing, it's actually, dude, this is green. This is an apple, a red apple with some green stuff on it. So your brain in real time is decoding this relationship and telling you your eyes are deceiving you, and what this actually is green. Now, for the purposes of art though, you want to get rid of that habit. You want to get rid of your brain's filter of looking at things and telling you what it actually is. You need to know not what it is in the absolute, like, yes, this is green on red and then affected by whatever light. You need to know what it looks like in this particular setting. You need to be able to override your brain's natural mechanism to decipher things for you, and you need to be able to look at things and see, no, this is actually what it is. So a couple ways to practice real quick. First one is just trying to get color right. So I would say that this is probably the first thing that I would practice with. I'll maybe show you guys some thumbs later on. I would just look at a color and I would try and match it, so you can paint it right on top. Now, we saw already that if you paint it on a different color background, which this would be white because the context for the apple is pretty much red all over, you want to paint it in the area that you see it in. So this is over here. I would say that this is a very highly saturated red. So you need to think of saturation. You need to think of how light it is also. So let's say if it was the highlight over here, you'd probably be looking over in this spectrum here. Like, you would completely cut off all options below over here, because it's not possible that the highlight would be any darker. It would also not probably go in that quadrant because that would be too saturated. So you're pretty much left with the options in here. So the highlight over here is probably, I'm probably going to be a bit off, but I would say it's sort of over there. Now, when I click on it, it's going to adjust for the actual temperature because it's most likely a bit cooler. So somewhere over there. This is my beginning estimate. Click on it. Yeah, a bit more saturated. A lot more saturated. So if you were to look for this color, you want to try and just give it your best guess. So mine was over here, let's say. Mine was over here. Now, when I put it over here and I see, okay, whoa, this is a lot darker than what I thought. Now, if I actually do go darker and I give it that, this is going to look dirty now. This is going to be too desaturated to be that color. So it actually would be still as light, but more saturated. So I would go towards here. So try it again. And that's a lot closer. Now, when you're actually painting it, you'd be painting most likely with some degree of transparency. So your swatches are always going to stand out a little bit. Don't freak out over that. This is pretty close. This is close enough. If you are actually painting this apple, then you would have most likely, again, some transparency, and you would be glazing it on. So you'd be glazing over the top of it. Now you can see that when you glaze it, it's a lot closer. So this would be the actual color that you're looking for. We've done this one. Let's have a stab at this one, okay? Super saturated, red. Now there's blue around it, and there's also all this orange and other colors around. So I might be thinking red. That could just be my brain telling me, decoding for me that, dude, this should be red. Yeah, but I'm onto you, brain. So maybe I'll go for a slightly cooler red than I think it might be. Also, it's very saturated. Let's start here. You don't have to be super precise. Just think analytically about it and give it your best shot. So putting it on here, way too bright. So it is a bit darker. Saturation looks about okay. Temperature could maybe be slightly cooler. So always keep those three variables in mind. When you put a swatch of color down, does the value look okay? In this case, it's a bit too bright. How can you see? What if you can't see it? Well, then desaturate. Have a look. If you don't see something, and I'm the person that used to see nothing, okay? I did not understand the relationships. I didn't understand what people were saying when they were showing me stuff. I would need to basically test every single thing and verify, okay, yeah, that could be brighter squint your eyes, yeah, it could be darker, I'm not really sure. I can see it now. A while ago, I wouldn't have been able to see it. If you're the person that can see it, double check yourself. There's, at least in digital, there's always ways to separate the saturation, the brightness, and the temperature you can always identify with the color picker. So we know now that it's definitely a bit too bright, so I'm going to darken it. Maybe just slightly change the temperature of it. And maybe just give it another try now. A lot closer. Still a bit too bright. Down a bit. Again, this is not meant to be perfect. You are training your brain to perceive relationships correctly. Now do this with 1,000 apples and you'd be awesome at picking apples after. You should probably get a job picking apples. Make sure to learn the sorts and stuff. So make sure that you're always checking those three things. Check your value, check your temperature, and check the saturation. This one is going to be tricky, and this one is going to be tricky, and also this. Let's just take a quick stab at that green, just because it's probably going to be a bit surprising. Now this is green, but it's most likely, because of the context, going to be some sort of orangey yellow color. By the way, another thing that you could do, you could, just while you're learning to identify these things, you could just take a copy and move it off. Move it off away from the origin, and then just look at it like that. Painters will have devices like that, have like, they could make like a tube or something, and you just look at your subject through the tube, and you just look, you isolate that little point that you're trying to find what color it is. You look through that. You can do it with your hand even. You try and isolate that little point and see what color it is. So you can see this is yellow. It's some sort, it's desaturated yellow, which makes it look a bit greenish. So it's yellow, but not at full intensity. Whereas if you look at it over here, I don't know, it's a much higher likelihood that you would get it wrong. So let's take a stab at it. I would maybe even exaggerate where I think it might be, just because I'm trying to fight the natural tendency of my brain to decode for me. So thinking about value yet again. So I'm gonna go for this bit. So value is still pretty high. So it would be somewhere at the top of my color quadrant. So it would be I would probably pinpoint it down to this quadrant here. So I always just sort of think like, how light is it? And then I would just cut portions off, because the less you have to work with, the better. So I would most likely just pinpoint it over here somewhere. So it's definitely within the higher saturated values, higher saturated colors. I would probably go somewhere over here maybe. Let's have a quick stab at it. I really gotta go, guys, so I'm sorry. Okay, this is a bit too warm. How can you tell if it's too warm or too cool? That's another question. What if you've never done this stuff before? What's warm, what's cool? Well, basically, the easiest thing to do is to just think, which direction should I shift this in? So if it's the greens over here, to cool it down, you go towards the blues. To warm it up, you go towards the reds. So really, all the color temperature, at least in the digital realm of tools, is pretty much only concerned with the hue saturation slider. And it's normally very small adjustments that you have to do. So if I'm over here and this is just a tiny bit too warm, which substitute the word warm with it's shifted a bit more towards the reds, and you just, this is the degree of the color. So you can see over here just numerically, so like pinpoint it mathematically if you want to, if you're a precise person. So this is 45, this will be probably like, I don't know, 42, well, so it's going the other way, it's cooling off, so it's going this way, so it would be going towards 50 something. So over here we have 45, click on it, it's about 50, 51, 50, and color picker is great for this, identifying how colors change. So there's enormous variety everywhere, so never will you find a static color, which is why I recommend mostly just using transparency and glazing when you're painting, just so you can emulate that huge variety of color. You'll be able to get a lot more hues in, whereas if you're painting completely opaquely, which that would just be for an exercise. Okay, I hope this video wasn't too huge. Let's just have a quick look to see if there's anything else to cover. try different subject matters. If you're doing something like this, don't do it too complex. Just simplify everything into basic little shapes. Go with the color picker and just have a look at all the surprising variety of color that you'll find. How about that? How about that tree is blue? How about that? That is just stupid. Why is that tree blue? Why would you do that? Anyway, it's just blue. And this is, of course, this is yellow. Sure, grass, of course, it's just yellow, as we all know. What's the point of coloring books? I really don't understand this. Anyway, mountains are, of course, blue, as we all know. Atmospheric perspective, by the way, a good way to think about it is that normally you'll be somewhere in this quadrant. So anytime you have anything going on in the foreground will be middle point and below, unless there's some very bright highlights. So you can see, because the darks are going to be closest to you, so everything, almost everything, as you can see, just bouncing all around normally over here, unless again there's just something super saturated or lit, which would then be bright. But normally you're dealing with sort of stuff down here, and also the super saturated color. So maybe like a curve like this, and we're looking at the bottom part. So like a curve like this, and we are concerned with the part in here. And then when you're dealing with atmospheric perspective, it will most likely be this curve over here. So colors are very light and very desaturated, so they stay up in this bit over here in the top quadrant. So if we switch over to the blues and just start color picking over here, colors will be desaturated and bright. So this, if it was close to you, would be super black. So this would be something like this in the photograph. And further away, we go even more towards that curve up here. Okay, any last words? I'll just quickly show you studies that I've done when I've been doing these, just to show you how simple they are. That's it. You shrink the photo down. That's an even better way to do it, and I didn't remember to actually say that to you guys. Just make a thumbnail. Have a photo, shrink it down, make it super small so you can't even focus on details, and just start making thumbnails. Make very small thumbnails. Paint opaquely or however you want. It doesn't really matter. What you're aiming for is just getting color relationships correct. Okay, this is working. This is super crude, but for a study is definitely working. And you can see I'm off on some colors and on the saturation, definitely. But as I'm doing these, I'm learning a super amount of, again, grass is actually orange and mountains are blue and all the rest of the stuff that you learn when you, of course, grass can also be like a weird red purple color, or super desaturated gray-green. Just anything that you could probably think of, that's not true. So that's why you do a lot of these. So you train your brain to like, dude, we don't know anything about anything. Again, super simple. And this actually helped me just realize how simple you have to go to actually get a good result. Like this is a figure, and all it took is just like a little dab of paint over here, and that's it. Super simple, super quick. So you can see this is an hour, 40 minutes. This one's 15 minutes. You get faster as you go. So this is like June. I've probably been doing these for a couple months before I got to that point. So just experimenting, trying things around. Another good subject matter for color study. And you can see actually how off I am on the subtle nuances of the reds bleeding into the other colors. I was not really at that time thinking about surfaces and how they interact with each other. I was just trying to reproduce everything. Like I said, that's the mistake, to do the shape, do the color, just learn how to paint as I'm learning about color. Too many things to think about. More thumbnails. Always just shrink down, pick simple shapes, just try as best you can. Try and match the colors. Think about your value, your hue, saturation, the temperature. Goodbye.